Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie. And in this video, I want to look at the week starting on Monday, July the 8th, 2024. So in this video, I'm going to look at what is going to be going on this week starting on Monday, July the 8th. And I'm going to begin by just considering the main astrological events. I'm just going to do a blow-by-blow account. Now, this week there isn't actually a great deal going on. I mean, certainly compared with last week. I mean, there are a couple of things worthy of note. For example, Venus in Leo. Also, Venus makes an opposition to Pluto. And actually, I want to concentrate on this Venus opposition Pluto and ask the question, what does it mean if you have Venus opposition Pluto in your horoscope? And I'm going to use a few examples. And in the thumbnail, I've got some of those examples shown. Candace Owens, for example, she is all over YouTube, sort of this fairly right-wing commenter who, she has a particular view of the world. She recently had an argument with Ben Shapiro, who is another right-wing YouTube star. And I think that argument was something to do with Gaza, and it was perhaps connected maybe with her Venus opposition Pluto. Then we've got Tulsi Gabbard, possible vice presidential pick for Donald Trump. She's got Venus opposition Pluto. Alec Baldwin who accidentally shot someone on set of that film Rust, so we'll be looking at his Venus opposition Pluto. Mitch McConnell, he's the, minority leader in the Senate. Is that right? Yeah, he's got Venus opposition Pluto. And former South Vietnamese President Ngo Dinh Diem, who was murdered with the assistance of the CIA in 1963, he had Venus opposition Pluto. I'll be looking at a few other examples. And I want to finish this video by looking at the I Ching for the week. That means I'm going to ask a question specifically saying, what is the week going to be like for those watching the I Ching segment of this video? And just a reminder, that segment only applies to people who actually watch the segment. If you don't want your I Ching done for the coming week, just don't watch the segment because it doesn't apply to you. Okay, so let's start off by considering what's going on this week. So that's C.S. Lewis's chart I've got there. He's got Venus opposition Pluto, but I'll be looking at that chart very soon. But here is the chart. It says Monday, July the 1st. Actually, it's not Monday, July the 1st. It's Monday, July the 8th. So let me just change that. It is, of course, July the 8th. There we go. Okay, Monday, July the 8th. So those are the start positions for this week. So, we already know that Neptune is now retrograde. So Neptune got so close to the Aries point, to 0 degrees Aries last week, but it's now retreating. Notice also the Mars-Uranus conjunction. It's now within orb. It's less than 5 degrees apart. I think 5 degrees is sometimes a good orb to use. When two planets are within 5 degrees of an aspect, particularly, I'm talking about a major aspect like a conjunction or an opposition. that I think is a good orb to use in natal astrology. So Mars and Uranus are getting closer and closer, and by next week it'll be exact on, of course, July the 15th. So we're getting more and more aggression and anger moving in, increased chance of things happening that are perhaps unexpected, unexpected disasters, and people getting angry and perhaps being prepared to do things that under normal circumstances they wouldn't do. And I should point out that Uranus is now increasingly close to Algol. So Algol is that fixed star, the Gorgon's head, very much associated with unpleasant events. And at the moment, it's how close to Algol? Uranus, how close is it to Algol at the moment? So Uranus is now 29, beginning of the week, 29 arc minutes. So Uranus is now less than half a degree from making the conjunction to Algol. So again, we're starting to pick up on it. We're starting to see perhaps how unpleasant the world is. Yeah, it is now happening. And so that is something that we really do need to consider. Now, in terms of the days of the week, on Monday, that's Monday, July the 8th, we have two sextile aspects. We have Venus sextile Uranus, and we have Mercury sextile Jupiter. I would have said that both of those sextiles are pretty fortunate. I mean, Venus sextile Uranus is quite an exciting aspect. I mean, it's not a square, it's not a conjunction, it's not super dynamic, but sextile represents a certain amount of talent. Okay, we have to put a little bit of effort into a sextile. Remember, a sextile is 1/6 of the circle, 60 degrees. And so 6 is all about 2 times 3. So it's a combination of 2 and 3. So 2 is the number of conflict, of polarity. 3 is a number of ease. So when you put those together, you have to put in a little bit of effort. That boulder will not move unless you push it a little. It's not like a trine where things just move all by themselves. And with that Venus sextile Uranus, if we make a bit of an effort, we can make things happen. It might be a great time for meeting interesting people. We make an effort, for example, to socialize, to say hello, and we get an interesting response. Venus is also the planet of money. Venus sextile Uranus, it could be an opportunity there. It's also Venus connected with style and what we look like. So Venus sextile Uranus, some of us might be able to do something interesting to our appearance. Of course, make sure it's reversible. We don't want to do anything irreversible to our appearance, but just doing something to one's appearance that can make one stand out, and it doesn't have to be too difficult. Then we've got Mercury sextile Jupiter. That is a nice aspect. Mercury sextile Jupiter allows us to express ourselves. It's in positive signs. Mercury in Leo, sextile Jupiter in Gemini. We can really make ourselves heard, and in some cases we can get attention. Getting attention is always important, and it might be good for relationships, especially if Mercury or if Mercury or Jupiter rule your sign. When I say your sign, it depends what you look at. Is it your ascendant? Is it your sun? Is it your moon? So it's Mercury sextile Uranus is good for relationships for Gemini. because Sagittarius, Pisces, Virgo, and perhaps also for Leos, because Mercury is in Leo and it's sextile Jupiter. But that's half the signs. It's probably all the signs. I think Mercury sextile Jupiter is probably good for relationships in general, at the very least, because it facilitates communication, and it's not crazy communication. It's a sextile. We're not going to upset the world or cause offence. In the middle of the week, on Thursday, we have got 3 events. We've got the Sun trine Saturn. So the Sun starts a week at 16 Cancer, but by Thursday it's moved a few degrees. It's trine Saturn. It's trine Saturn in Pisces, and so Sun trine Saturn creates a bit of stability, and things are not so chaotic. And so if we find that things are chaotic and we don't like the way things are going, we can take action to bring things under control. So I think that Sun trine Saturn is potentially quite fortunate. If you're a Capricorn, and particularly an Aquarius, that Sun trine Saturn might actually be quite good for relationships, allowing one to stabilize relationships. If there's been any recent misunderstandings or crazy behavior, everything can be brought under control. Then we've got Venus trine Neptune. It's a nice aspect, Venus trine Neptune. It's gentle. Okay, there's a bit of deception, but not too much deception. Sort of gentle fantasy. But with Venus trine Neptune, it's perhaps going to be easier than usual to understand other people, really get to know what makes them tick. And if we have any psychic skills, then I think that Venus trine Neptune should help. Now, Venus is making that trine to Neptune right at the end of Cancer, and then straight away makes a trine to Neptune. Then Venus moves into Leo. So Venus moving into Leo, some people, I suppose, are going to have a high opinion of themselves. There's a certain sense of vanity, I'm afraid, with Venus moving into Neptune, with Venus moving into Leo. It has to be vanity, doesn't it? Venus is particularly in terms of vanity, in terms of what we look like. So people are going to be perhaps more vain than usual, more focused on their appearance. And in terms of relationships, Venus being the planet of relationships, with Venus moving into Leo, people are going to want attention, and flattery could get you everywhere. So if you want something from someone with Venus moving into Leo at the end of a week, then tell them how wonderful they are, or tell them how attractive and beautiful, and tell them how great their taste is. Whatever you need to say, it should work better than usual with Venus moving into Leo. But we mustn't take ourselves too seriously with Venus moving into Leo. Getting attention is not the only thing that matters. And we also shouldn't forget that Leo is a fixed sign. So with Venus actually moving into Leo, it could be a time for relationships to be stabilized. So it kind of comes at the same time as Sun trine Saturn. So Sun trine Saturn and Venus moving into Leo together might really help relationships to be made perhaps more of a permanent fixture, if that's what you want. Then Friday, July the 12th, we've got 2 aspects. Mercury sesquiquadrate Neptune. I suppose that comes just after Venus trine Neptune. There's a little bit of deception there. We could get confused. So on Thursday I talked about the perhaps the fantasy of Venus trine Neptune, but then Friday, Mercury sesquiquadrate Neptune, the fantasy could move to another level, and there could be just confusion and not really knowing what's going on. Sure, it might be good for one's psychic abilities, but we just could be overwhelmed by all the information coming in. And then Venus opposition Pluto, which is the aspect I'm going to talk about today. So Venus opposition Pluto, that means we got Venus in Leo opposition Pluto in Aquarius. So that could be about people taking themselves seriously, taking their emotions seriously in fixed signs, not prepared to change. Something very deep, something very intense, and perhaps we feel that we need to keep our emotions quite secret, particularly if those emotions relate to other people. Do we really want people to know what we're thinking and feeling? Possibly not. But at the same time, we can be quite charismatic with Venus opposition Pluto. There's something about us that is attractive and compelling. So that might be another aspect of Venus opposition Pluto. I mean, from a general collective point of view, I suppose you could say Venus is a universal significator of women and its opposition Pluto. So in certain cases there might be issues regarding, women's rights. What is a woman? That's always an issue, Venus opposition Pluto. On a political stage, that could be something that's talked about a lot. I suppose you could also say that it's abortion rights or right to have abortion laws. So women's control over their body, that kind of thing with Venus opposition Pluto. Of course, Pluto is about control. And so I suppose it depends where you are. I think that one of the southern states is planning on or trying to push forward even stricter abortion laws. So that might be about Venus opposition Pluto. I mean, just check the news wherever you are. And really, that's pretty much it. Those are the main events. There's no super big events, no new moons or full moons this week. Nothing going retrograde, nothing going direct. No outer planet aspects. So I'm not going to say it's going to be a quiet week, but in terms of what I can see, I don't see anything mega dramatic. Now, turning to Venus opposition Pluto in terms of what it means in a horoscope. Now, it's possible that Venus opposition Pluto means nothing. I mean, if you do not use Pluto in your natal astrology, some people don't use Pluto. Yeah, a standard Vedic astrologer will not use Pluto. It's a discovered planet. Pluto was discovered in 1930. To be honest, I think you can interpret a chart without Pluto. But most people do want to use Pluto. And, with Pluto, if you've got Venus opposition Pluto, it might be someone who takes themselves very seriously. Their emotions are serious. Something is held back, can have a connection with relationships. So someone with Venus opposition Pluto may relate to people in a way that could be a little bit difficult because there's always something that is not revealed. And so that might make relationships potentially a problem area. I mean, I'm not saying that is definitely the case, but it's all very intense. And I suppose with Venus opposition Pluto, you might see the possibility of jealousy and possessiveness in terms of other people. Now that could work both ways. Venus opposition Pluto could be someone who is jealous and possessive. It could be someone who is the victim of jealousy and possessiveness. Might work both ways. And Venus, of course, is a feminine planet. So I think it's very likely that Venus opposition Pluto works in a different way depending on whether you are male or female. If you are a woman and you've got Venus opposition Pluto, that is your Venus opposition Pluto. It's not projected onto someone else. So I would have said that in a female chart, the Venus opposition Pluto is more likely to be actually owned. And that's kind of the person you are. Someone who does take the world seriously, who has powerful feelings, who realizes that you can't take risks with emotions. On the other hand, if you are a man with Venus opposition Pluto, could say something about how you treat women or your experience with women. That is a possibility. And it's in general, Venus is more likely to be projected in terms of sort of outside events just sort of coming along. So those are a few ideas with Venus opposition Pluto. We should also not forget that Venus is a planet connected with money, and so Venus opposition Pluto may say something about your relationship to money. Perhaps you're very aware of money in terms of the power it represents. It can be a surrogate for power, money. You want to be in control of your life, you want to be in control of your finances. Or you perhaps believe that money is an area that makes you incredibly vulnerable, and so you're very careful in that particular department. So that's Venus opposition Pluto in a sense of being from a theoretical perspective. So let's look at a few people who have Venus opposition Pluto in their charts. Here is Al Capone, the famous, infamous gangster, and he had Venus opposition Pluto. You can see Al Capone actually had Venus exactly opposition Pluto, and so we associate Al Capone with extortion, manipulation, I suppose. I suppose he was quite a successful criminal. He peaked early. He's born in 1899. I think he was arrested. When was it? Well, in the 30s. The peak of Al Capone's career was the Valentine's Day massacre. So, in fact, he was only 30 at the time of the Valentine's Day massacre. So he turned 30 on February the 14th. He turned 30 on January the 17th, 1929. So after the Valentine's Day massacre, that was pretty much it. So he had Venus opposition Pluto, and we can associate that Venus opposition Pluto with him and extortion, manipulation. So that's one way it works. It could work. Venus could also be associated with particular types of disease and maybe sexual disease. Now, I am absolutely not associating Venus opposition Pluto with sexually transmitted diseases in all cases. It kind of depends on your lifestyle, doesn't it? But the reality is that Al Capone died of syphilis, and I understand that many people died of syphilis. I suppose this was the era before antibiotics. antibiotics, as I understand it, are pretty much an instant cure for syphilis, but he did not have access to antibiotics. I mean, I think he may have died. I think he died in the 1940s, is that right? But, it was too late for him. So syphilis is what got him, and perhaps you can see that from his chart with that exact Venus opposition Pluto. So perhaps we're seeing Venus opposition Pluto working in different ways. Manipulation, possibly manipulating women. I think prostitution may well have been part of his racket. And so dying of syphilis, that sort of fits, doesn't it? I mean, it's not so surprising. And his Venus opposition Pluto is given added strength by the Sun. You can see the Sun is at 27-26 Capricorn. So the Sun was actually semi-square his Venus and sesquiquadrate his Pluto. Not an exact semi-square and sesquiquadrate, but I think that Sun semi-square Venus sesquiquadrate his Pluto would have possibly added to his capacity to be manipulative. And at the time of the Valentine's Day massacre, Venus was at 1207 Aries. So Venus was moving towards a sesquiquadrate with his Venus, with his natal Venus, and was moving towards a semi-square with his Pluto. Wasn't exactly there, but maybe it was close enough. But I mean, I'm not a great expert on Al Capone, but I think from what we know about his life, I think there's enough evidence there to say that we can see one way in which this aspect is, this Venus-Pluto opposition was working. Another person who had Venus opposition Pluto. Here's a chart I really like. I mean, I like to look at this chart, and that is Ngo Dinh Diem. So I do look at his chart every now and then, and he was president of he was president of South Vietnam. He was born January the 3rd, 1901. So it's sort of similar generation to Al Capone, and there's his Venus in Sagittarius, opposition Pluto. So here is a politician who liked to be in control, and who tried to, he was manipulative. He became president of South Vietnam. He brought in the Americans. I don't know to what extent he had much control over that, but he wanted to create changes within South Vietnam. And Ngo Dinh Diem was, I think, a Catholic, and he got into trouble through his persecution of Buddhists in South Vietnam. And of course, that infamous picture of that monk setting himself on fire in 1963 in protest about the way Ngo Dinh Diem's regime was treating the Buddhist population and Buddhist monks. And so control was obviously very important to Ngo Dinh Diem. Venus opposition Pluto. So if you've got any politician with Venus opposition Pluto, you should be concerned. How are they trying to manipulate? How are they trying to be clever? And perhaps being too clever by half. Now, what's interesting about Ngo Dinh Diem's horoscope, he's got this Venus opposition Pluto, but he didn't have any water in his chart. So he's playing these power games, but perhaps not entirely understanding what's going on. That's water. Water would have a certain sensitivity, and perhaps he thought everything was fine. That's when Lyndon B. Johnson in I think in 1961, when Lyndon B. Johnson was Kennedy's vice president, he said that Ngo Dinh Diem was the Churchill of Asia. A bulwark against communism. And then a couple of years later, in 1963, there was a coup, and he was murdered, assassinated, executed, however you want to see it. and that was the end of him. So that Venus opposition Pluto, in the end, he became a victim with that Venus opposition Pluto. And he just wasn't sensitive enough. He played too many power games. So if you got Venus opposition Pluto, you just have to be careful about the power games that you play. Another politician who I have looked at quite recently, in fact very recently, is the Secretary General designate of NATO, who is the Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte. So Mark Rutte has Venus opposition Pluto. Now, he very unlike Ngodin Diem, he very much has water in his horoscope, and he is a very successful politician. And with Venus opposition Pluto, he just has a natural understanding of what to manipulate, who to manipulate. The Venus can represent, I suppose, to an extent, the public. I mean, the moon in a horoscope is more about the public, but Venus is about how you come over in a social setting. So I suppose if you want to be Prime Minister of anywhere, you have to have good social skills, and Venus opposition Pluto allows you to be a successful manipulator. And so, he's going to go on to being Secretary General of NATO. I think he takes office on October the 1st. So I suppose he will carry on manipulating. Of course, the problem that Rutte has at the moment is that Saturn has just gone retrograde at 19 degrees 26 Pisces. That was a week ago, wasn't it? And so Saturn has actually gone retrograde on his Venus-Pluto opposition. So Venus-Pluto for Mark Rutte is, the heart of his ability to manipulate and twist and control. And so with Saturn aspecting his Venus opposition Pluto, all of a sudden it might suddenly not work anymore. So in other words, we can say that he has Saturn aspecting his Venus-Pluto midpoint. So perhaps his manipulations are going to suddenly start to backfire. I know he's already moving out of Dutch politics, but who knows what he's up to. This may link to what his international manipulations, Ukraine, perhaps something going wrong. But it's not great. He's probably not particularly happy at the moment. Not a particularly happy bunny at the moment, with Saturn moving towards a conjunction of his Venus in Pisces. So that's Mark Rutte. Let's continue on the theme of politicians. Politicians can be very manipulative. That's what you have to be a politician. And here's a successful politician, Mitch McConnell, who is still Republican leader in the Senate, I think, even though he's just turned 82. So there is, he's got Venus at 5 Aquarius and opposition Pluto. So what we know about Mitch McConnell is he's been in this position for ages. Some would argue that he's one of the most powerful people in the United States. He doesn't get perhaps the high profile of the president, but he's always there, always manipulating. And he's got his hands on the machinery of power. And you can see how he was able to sort of manipulate Supreme Court appointments. When Obama wanted to appoint, Merrick Garland to the Supreme Court, right at the end of his time of office, but the Senate stalled. It was all about Mitch. I think a lot of it was what Mitch McConnell was doing, and they stalled and stalled and stalled until Trump took over, and then Trump decided to pick someone else. So here is someone who has a considerable amount of control. Interestingly, Mitch McConnell, yeah, he's a bit of a neocon as well. Big supporter of the United States war against Russia, and he's got his Venus at 5 Aquarius. Vladimir Zelensky has got a Sun-Venus conjunction, president of Ukraine. He's got a Sun-Venus conjunction at 5 Aquarius. So that Venus opposition Pluto is right on Vladimir Zelensky's Sun-Venus conjunction. That suggests to me that there's quite a powerful relationship between the two men. Mitch McConnell seems to think it's perhaps very important to support Ukraine and to support its president. And so also with Mitch McConnell, we do not know where his moon is, but if we take his noon chart, noon time in Sheffield, Alabama, where I think he was born, the moon would be at 4 degrees Taurus. So if he was born around noon, we would actually have a T-square with Venus opposition Pluto, with moon in Taurus on the T. Taurus would be very stubborn. This is a fixed sign. Here is someone who doesn't just manipulate, but has a very clear idea about what he wants. Another person is Candace Owens. So she just appears on YouTube all the time, and she makes loads and loads of videos and YouTube shorts, and she's very pleased with herself, and she makes these short points, and she's on the right, and she's got Venus opposition Pluto. As I said, I don't know a great deal about Candace Owens, but she's successful at what she does, and she has Venus opposition Pluto. She has Venus at 1542 Taurus, so her Venus is actually semi-square the Aries point. That's a nice Venus for it to be semi-square the Aries point, because the Aries point represents the world at large. So if you've got Venus at 15 Taurus, that may be very good for having a public profile. And clearly, over the last few years, that's something that she has developed with her right-wing conservative niche. And you could say Venus in Taurus opposition Pluto. You could say that is conservative. That is not progressive. We want to keep things as they are. We do not want change. We don't want all this sort of woke garbage cluttering things up. So that might be Venus opposition Pluto. I'm not going to say a great deal about her because I don't know a great deal about her, but I do know that she had an argument with Ben Shapiro. So Ben Shapiro, similar, same kind of profession as her, right-wing YouTube star, and everyone thinks Ben Shapiro is very clever because they always talk about his arguing points and his arguing technique. There's always these videos of Ben Shapiro, also the same kind of videos with Candace Owens, but Ben Shapiro has always these arguments. There's him arguing with progressive students, and these videos are trying to illustrate the point that these progressive students haven't got a clue what they're talking about. But clearly Ben Shapiro is good at arguing, and he's not the kind of person you want to have an argument with. And I think it's kind of interesting to look at the chart, the synastry between the two. So they did fall out over Gaza, I think. I think that, correct me if I'm wrong, but Candace Owens was saying that the United States should not be involved with Israel because the United States has got its own problems. I think she was also showing some concern about what was happening to the people in Gaza. Again, correct me if I'm wrong. I wasn't really following that particular argument, but I know it was a big bust up on the right. So just wanted to quickly compare the charts of Ben Shapiro and Candace Owens. With Ben Shapiro, because he's born in California, in Burbank, California, we have a time of birth. Californian births, we usually get a time. Candace Owens was born in Connecticut. We don't know what. I'm sure her time of birth is available somewhere, but actually, it would be better to look at it the other way round. Put Candace Owen in the middle. So we'll put Candace Owen in the middle, and we'll ask the question: how does Ben Shapiro occur to Candace Owens? And there is Ben Shapiro's Saturn at 15 degrees 3 minutes Scorpio. So his Saturn is sesquiquadrate the Aries point. So that's, in a way, is quite a strong Saturn, at least by virtue of it being close to the Aries point. It's quite prominent. And so his Saturn is exactly opposition Candace Owens' Venus, and so it's conjunct her Venus-Pluto. And so you could say that Candace Owens, with her Venus opposition Pluto, that in a way Venus opposition Pluto was her powerhouse, perhaps it is her powerhouse, that focus and that intensity, and maybe a little bit of compassion, maybe regarding the people of Gaza and so forth. But I haven't been following this argument in detail. But Ben Shapiro's Saturn smashes her Venus opposition Pluto. His Saturn opposition her Venus. She's kind of met her match there. And I think that, so we could say her Venus, that's her as a woman, clashing with his Saturn. So from his perspective, she is a woman who annoys him. Saturn is his boundaries, what he thinks is right and wrong, perhaps even how he thinks women should behave. Venus opposition Saturn, that irritates Saturn. And then Saturn hits that Venus and gets, really tries to make that Venus tries to make that Venus feel small, Saturn opposition Venus. So his Saturn is really, really smashing up her Venus opposition Pluto. So it's fortunate that Ben Shapiro and Candace Owens are not married. I think if they were married, that Saturn would cause all sorts of problems. Okay, so let's move on. Oh, I should briefly point out that my dog, the dog that sometimes is barking, does have Venus opposition Pluto. My dog has Venus in Cancer, opposition Pluto in Capricorn. So she's a Venus-Pluto dog. She takes herself seriously. She wants attention, and she's very specific, about what she wants. Okay, so that's her. Now let's look at Alec Baldwin. So Alec Baldwin, famous actor, Venus opposition Pluto. There is his Venus and its opposition Pluto. It's not immediately apparent that he has Venus opposition Pluto because it's a dissociate opposition. So you'd expect his Venus at 27. By the way, I don't know what time he's born. That is just a noon chart. You'd expect Venus at 27 Aquarius to be opposition Pluto at 3 Leo or whatever, but it's not. But Venus and Pluto are within 3 degrees of each other. So very much Venus opposition Pluto. Now, one thing we do know about about Alec Baldwin is that he shot someone on a film set, specifically on this film called Rust. And so you could say, if you've got Venus opposition Pluto, remember that Venus is projectable. That may say something about what happens to some women if they get too close to him. This could be a man who is quite possessive, but Venus opposition Pluto is about transition. And so I suppose you could say one way of transformation is accidentally killing someone. One moment, this woman, I can't remember her name. She was Ukrainian. One moment she's alive, the next moment she's dead. Venus opposition Pluto. And here's actually the chart of the shooting. So inner wheel we have Alec Baldwin. Outer wheel is the shooting, the Rust shooting. What I'm sort of looking for is aspects to her Venus-Pluto to her Venus-Pluto, to his Venus-Pluto opposition. I don't think that there are any, although it's sort of worth noting that at the time of the shooting, the moon was conjunct Uranus. I think it was actually, if I've got the time right, the moon was conjunct the IC and conjunct Uranus, and also Pluto was on the ascendant. So those are the transits. There was certainly interesting stuff going on at the time, but maybe it's the solar arc directions we should be looking at. So here are Alec Baldwin's solar arc directions for the time of the shooting. So let's just look at that side by side. And the outer wheel is so solar arc directed Saturn. So this, how old is he? He was about what, 60, in his early 60s when this happened. So we would move everything. So there's his natal Saturn. So if we move Saturn 62 degrees, so he's born in 1958, the shooting happened in 2021. If we move that natal Saturn forward around 62 degrees, it directs from 25 Sagittarius to 2719 Aquarius. So Saturn is exactly on his Venus. So that is perfect, not perhaps the right word, but that is a very good signature of a woman dying. Saturn conjunct Venus. And I think perhaps that direction is made more intense by the fact that Venus is opposition Pluto. And so with Venus opposition Pluto, this is about him transforming a woman from being alive to dead. And Saturn is conjunct his Venus. So I think that actually works pretty well. So that's Alec Baldwin. So we're drawing to the end now. Let's look at someone else. Yeah, C.S. Lewis. So C.S. Lewis, I don't have a time of birth for him. He was born in Northern Ireland, and on November the 29th, 1898. And he has Venus opposition Pluto. Now, again, it's difficult to have a perspective on that because we don't have the precise time, but we can see that other planets are involved as well. So he has Venus opposition Pluto, he had Saturn opposition Pluto, and there was something a little bit weird about relationships and also women. So in the First World War, he fought he became an officer at the end, towards the end of the First World War, and he had a close friendship with another officer, and apparently they made this pact that if either of them were to die, the other would look after that person's family. And so with this pact, this other officer, he got killed. And so C.S. Lewis then spent a lot of time with the mother of this of this officer, this man who'd been killed, and I think there was an incredibly close relationship with this much older woman. I mean, I think he might have been 19 at the time, and this woman was in her 40s, and so that may say something about the Venus opposition Pluto. Very strange, intense relationships, and as we saw with Alec Baldwin, we could associate Venus opposition Pluto with the death of women. And when C.S. Lewis was 8, his mother died of cancer, and he married fairly late. I think he married an American writer in I think just after the Second World War. But anyway, she died of cancer as well. So it's kind of a bit of tragedy there. But this woman he married, I think she died in her 40s of cancer. So the fact that, two of the women he'd been closely involved with both died of cancer, and we could perhaps see that with Venus opposition Pluto. It's perhaps a tough Venus. With that Venus opposition Pluto. Now, that's not saying that just because you've got Venus opposition Pluto, you have to have this kind of tragedy. We're looking at it after the event. Just do bear that in mind. And I think that is about it. I don't want to talk about anyone else. I'm going to look at Venus Pluto again, I think, later in the week. But I want to look at it in terms of a Venus-Pluto event. Because I've been focusing on individuals, but I want to look at the kind of events that happen when Venus is opposition Pluto. So I'm now going to transition to the I Ching. And I should say, by the way, that selection of people with Venus opposition Pluto is totally biased. It reflects my interests. It's not necessarily a reflection of the general population who have Venus opposition Pluto. So, I'm just it just reflects my interest. So perhaps don't take it too seriously, particularly if you have Venus opposition Pluto in your own chart. So, as far as the I Ching is concerned, just remember that this I Ching reading is only for people who want it, who want a reading. If you don't want a reading, you don't have to watch the rest of this video, because it only applies to people who watch the I Ching segment of this video. So I asked the question, what is the week starting on Monday, June the 8th, going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And that's a question I asked, and this question will be answered using four categories. I'm going to give a general reading, then I'm going to look at money, then career and business, and finally relationships. So the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 15, which is modesty. And this hexagram does not move. It's a locked hexagram. And so because it's a locked hexagram, I'm thinking that maybe not actually a great deal is going to be happening this week. It doesn't matter what the hexagram is. The fact it doesn't move to another hexagram indicates that it may be just quite a quiet week, regardless of what you're asking about. Though we do get some hints about what might be going on, because modesty is about a lack of show. It's not a time for telling the world how wonderful we are, and we have to really focus on what we can achieve, what our talents are, and we certainly shouldn't be concerned about praise. And I suppose if we link that with the astrology, we have got Venus moving into Leo. We've got Mercury already in Leo. So we've got this hexagram modesty happening at a time when we're getting a growing Leo emphasis. So for some of us, that might mean that we have to show a little bit of restraint. We perhaps want to be praised. We want people to tell us how wonderful we are. We want to be acknowledged. But we have to be disciplined here. Modesty is telling us that that is not the right approach. We should be trying our hardest to just do what we can do, and in many ways making a special effort not to attract attention, not to sing our own praises, to be even understating what we're doing. Not, perhaps if we are praised, we should say, no, it wasn't me. Sort of, I am so humble. I mean, I know that we can have false modesty, but it's what people want to see. People that show off this week, I don't think it's going to work. I know there is this big temptation to show off, but I wouldn't recommend that course of action. And there is a nuclear hexagram here. This is the hexagram behind the hexagram, where we look at the 4 central lines, and we knock off the top line and the bottom line. So you can see if you knock off the top line and the bottom line, you get that there's a second, third, and fourth lines at the bottom, and then the third, fourth, and fifth lines at the top of the new hexagram. So the nuclear hexagram is actually deliverance, and this can be the hexagram of dodging a bullet. Something bad is kind of about to happen, but we manage to avoid it. That's not the hexagram itself, but it's just the background. And it just may be that, one of the reasons for being modest is because if we are modest, we don't get attention, but at the same time, we don't attract negative attention. Getting too much attention may bring its own problems. So that is another reason why modesty could be important. Now, turning to money, I think the message is very simple with modesty. It is not a time to be spending money. And it's specifically a time not to be seen to be spending money. Because if you spend a lot of money and people see you spending a lot of money, you attract attention. And that is not what you want to do. I think we need to have a frugal lifestyle. And if you are financially well off, or at least better off than some of the people around you, it's all relative, isn't it? So whatever the situation, you may feel that you're completely poor, but if, for example, you were to visit, a slum in a developing world, you would be rich in comparison. But whatever the situation, it is really important that you understate how much money you have got. So any sign that you might have money, whether it's your car, it's your jewelry, it's the restaurants you go to, any sign should be kind of removed. So in terms of what you wear, dress down. You don't want to appear to be someone who's got more money from the people around you. And certainly don't talk about your money, and just give the impression that you have as little money as possible. It may even be a good idea to just tell people that, things are not good financially, even if they're fine. Just give the impression that you just haven't got any money. And also that should be in terms of your behavior. So don't spend money, be modest. Don't buy things that are expensive if it's unnecessary. Don't buy them at all if it's unnecessary. And that is what the universe wants you to do. And I know it's tough because, we do have Mercury and Venus in Leo. So there is this temptation. Did I say that? Well, Venus moves into Leo at the end of a week. But there is this temptation to show how much money you've got. Sometimes we feel you have to show that you've got money because it doesn't feel good when people start to think that we're poor. We have to say, oh no, we have got some money. We have got an income. It is all fine, but we have to be a little bit disciplined there. So that, I think, is the best way of handling money this week. And it's all about an approach to money and the appearance one is giving in terms of money. Turning to career and business, it's going to be quite important not to show off. You may want to give the impression that there are lots of things you're good at. So of course, this only applies if you are working. Maybe you're not working. Maybe you're retired. I suppose it depends on the situation, but whatever it is, if there's any source of income that you're actually working on, or I suppose it's career. It could be any organisation you're involved with. It could be voluntary. It could be something voluntary. This can apply just as well, but it's just important not to show off about what your abilities are. Your abilities need to speak for themselves, and if you tell people about how wonderful they are and you just go on too much, you'll put people off. So if you have your own business and you spend ages and ages telling a potential client how great you are and how everyone thinks you're wonderful, that might not work. You need to be modest. You need to let your abilities speak for themselves. And if you're an employee, it seems that you don't want to tell the other person that, you don't want to talk up your skills. You might feel that it might be necessary. Oh, people need to know how wonderful you are if you want a promotion or if you want new responsibilities. That's absolutely not the case. You just need to be someone who is perhaps reliable in the background, doing a good job, and that's really all it takes. So it's really quite straightforward. But again, it's so difficult to be doing that because I think many of us are going to want attention at the moment with this build up in Leo, with Mercury, and at the end of the week, Venus in Leo. It's going to be so difficult. But I think that modesty will go a long way this week. Just for this week. I mean, next week is different. And finally, there is relationships. Again, modesty. If you are trying to get on with someone, they don't want to hear all about you. That's just really important. Just be yourself. Be prepared to listen as well as talk. And certainly don't talk up your achievements. And if you're trying to impress someone new, it's a new relationship, for whatever reason that relationship, that whatever reason you want to develop a relationship, just be yourself. I mean, you might think that if you're trying to impress someone, if you're trying to form a relationship with someone, you have to make a special effort to make it clear that you're a person that's well worth getting to know, that you're reliable and you're great. But no, that's not going to work. I think that anyone who talks too much about themselves is immediately going to attract suspicion. And probably you should take the same approach as well when trying to evaluate other people. So if you find that other people are going on and on about themselves, then they're probably not people you want to be connected with. On the other hand, if people are just very genuine and indeed are modest, then I think that that might be a sign that they're worth getting to know a lot better. And those are my forecasts for today. For this week. So overall, I don't think this week is going to be particularly action-packed. Certainly from an I Ching perspective, because we've got this locked hexagram. It doesn't move, and modesty is quite low profile, and so that is the approach. And I think to an extent this is supported by the astrology. The astrology is not incredible. There are some interesting aspects, but nothing major. So I think for many of us, it should be quite a quiet, low-profile week. Now, the week after, that's a different matter. So, thank you very much for listening to me. I hope you found this video useful. If you did find it useful, I'd be really grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. And if you want to buy me a coffee, there is a link in the description. So thanks again for listening, and have a great week, and I will talk to you again very soon.